A Lakota warrior took a woman rejected by her husband, never foreseeing she'd restore his heart. The sun hung low over the rolling plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and the faint smoke from village fires. On the edge of the Lakota village, near the river that wound like a silver ribbon through the land, a woman walked alone. Her steps were quiet, but her heart was heavy with sorrow. Her name was Winona, a name that meant firstborn daughter, though today she felt far from her rightful place in the world. Winona's hands trembled slightly as she clutched the bundle of belongings she had managed to carry. Her husband had left her weeks ago, abandoning her with only bitter words and a cold heart. The villagers whispered about the failed marriage, some with pity, some with judgment. She had once hoped for love, for the warmth of a family, but now all she felt was emptiness. Every stone, every tree, every gust of wind seemed to remind her of her loss. She walked near the river, letting its steady flow soothe her troubled mind, hoping that the water could carry away some of her pain. As she walked, she remembered the life she had once dreamed of. She had imagined evenings by the fire with laughter echoing through the lodge, children playing at her feet, and the quiet comfort of a strong hand to hold when the night felt too cold. But those dreams had been broken, like the delicate reeds along the riverbank snapped by the wind. Winona's heart ached with the sting of betrayal, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. From the tall grasses a figure watched her. He was a young warrior named Chaska, known among his people for his courage and skill. His eyes, sharp and observant, followed Winona's movements. He had seen her before, when she had walked in the village with her husband, laughing and talking, but today she was different. There was a quiet strength in the way she carried herself, even in sorrow, that drew his attention. He had faced many battles in his life, fought against rival bands, and hunted the fiercest of animals, yet something about this woman stirred, something unfamiliar in his heart. Chaska stepped closer, keeping a careful distance. He did not wish to frighten her, only to offer help if she needed it. The wind carried the sound of his boots softly against the grass, and Winona, startled, turned her head. Her eyes widened at the sight of him, a tall figure standing against the horizon, his presence both commanding and calm. "Are you well, woman?" Chaska asked, his voice deep but gentle. "You walk alone near the river. It is not safe for anyone to wander here without protection." Winona hesitated. She was not used to being spoken to kindly by strangers. Most people either ignored her or whispered about her misfortune. Something in Chaska's tone, however, made her feel a flicker of trust. She nodded slowly, unsure if she could speak without her voice trembling. I I am fine," she said softly. Her words were barely above the wind. "I just needed to think." Chaska stepped closer, but still kept a respectful distance. "The river can heal many things," he said, "but it cannot guard a person from the dangers of the plains alone. Come, I can offer you shelter for the night. You will be safe." Winona looked at him uncertain. Accepting help had always been difficult for her. Pride and shame battled within her. Could she trust this warrior? Could she step into his lodge without fear of judgment or ridicule? Yet something in Chaska's eyes, calm and steady, gave her hope. Perhaps this was a chance to find safety, if not comfort. "I will follow you," she said finally. Shaska nodded once and turned, walking slowly toward the village. Winona followed, her steps hesitant at first, then gradually steadying as she felt the weight of her sorrow lift slightly. She did not speak much, and Chaska did not press her. The silence between them was not awkward but gentle, filled with the soft whispers of the wind and the distant calls of birds returning to their nests. When they reached Chaska's lodge, the warrior opened the door with care. The lodge was simple, built with wooden poles and covered with buffalo hides. Smoke curled from the fire pit in the center, and the warm glow of the flames cast dancing shadows across the walls. Chaska gestured for her to sit. "Rest here," he said. "You are safe. You do not need to speak if you are not ready. No one will harm you here." Winona sank onto the soft hide, the tension in her shoulders slowly releasing. She had not realized how tired she was until she finally allowed herself to sit. The warmth of the fire seeped into her bones, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a small measure of peace. Chaska sat across from her, his eyes watching her with quiet curiosity. He did not speak immediately, understanding that words were not always necessary. Instead, he allowed the crackling fire to fill the space, the sound like a gentle reminder that life continued, even in the midst of sorrow. After a while, Winona spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Why do you help me? I am nothing. My husband left me. The villagers, they think I am weak, a failure." Chaska looked at her steadily, his expression calm and unwavering. "You are not nothing," he said. "Strength is not only in victory or skill. Strength is in endurance, in surviving the storms of life with dignity. You have that even if you do not see it now." Winona felt a warmth in her chest she had not felt in a long time. No one had ever said such words to her. Not her husband, not the villagers, not even her own family. For the first time, she felt that someone recognized her inner strength, even when she could not see it herself. "You speak like the elders," she said softly, a faint smile touching her lips. Chaska nodded. "The elders teach us many things, but experience teaches us more. I have faced battles where courage alone was not enough, and sometimes even warriors need guidance, as do women who have suffered. Today, I offer you that guidance if you will accept it." Winona hesitated, then nodded. I I will try." The warrior did not press further. He rose and moved to tend the fire, letting the evening settle around them. The stars began to appear in the deepening sky, sparkling like tiny flames scattered across velvet. Winona watched them silently, feeling a strange sense of hope. Perhaps this night would mark a turning point, a small step toward healing her broken heart. As the night deepened, Chaska prepared a simple meal, placing it before her with care. "Eat," he said. "It will give you strength. Tomorrow is another day, and every day is a chance to heal." Winona ate slowly, savoring not only the food but the kindness of the warrior. She felt a bond forming, fragile yet real, like the first shoots of spring pushing through the frozen ground. She did not yet know what this bond would bring, but she felt its presence, comforting and steady, like the river beside which they had first met. Later, as she settled to sleep on the soft hides, Winona allowed herself a small hope. Perhaps the plains could offer her more than sorrow. Perhaps a warrior's protection could become a friendship, and perhaps, in time, her heart could learn to trust again. Chaska watched her from across the lodge, his expression thoughtful. He had not come to her seeking conquest or admiration. He had come to offer what few could: respect, protection, and a recognition of her strength. And yet, he felt an unfamiliar stir in his chest, a sense that her presence had already begun to change him. He had faced many dangers, yet this feeling was new and unpredictable. Outside, the wind continued to whisper through the grasses, carrying with it the promise of a new day. And within the quiet lodge, a warrior and a woman, both wounded by life in their own ways, shared a moment of understanding. Neither knew what the future held, but both felt that something significant had begun. It was the start of a story neither had expected, a story of healing, trust, and perhaps, one day, love. The morning sun broke over the plains in a soft glow, casting long shadows across the village. Birds sang from the trees, their songs mingling with the distant chatter of villagers beginning their daily work. Inside the lodge, Winona stirred, slowly opening her eyes to the warmth of the fire's dying embers. Chaska had already risen. He moved quietly around the lodge, tending the small fire in the center and checking the perimeter through the open doorway. Even in these quiet moments, he carried himself with the calm strength that had first drawn Winona's attention. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice still husky from sleep. Shaska nodded without turning fully toward her. "Morning." "Sleep well?" Winona hesitated before answering. "As well as I could. Thank you for everything yesterday." He gave a small nod, returning to the fire. "Eat. The day is long, and the plains do not forgive weakness." She rose and sat at the low wooden table, her hands folded in her lap. She watched him carefully as he prepared a simple meal of roasted roots and dried meat. It amazed her how skilled he was, how his movements were precise yet unhurried, like a river flowing steadily over stones. Winona took the first bite, savoring the food. Some were curious, some suspicious. A few elders watched silently, their expressions unreadable, yet their eyes were sharp, weighing the situation carefully. Winona felt their scrutiny like a weight pressing on her shoulders. She had survived abandonment and ridicule, yet the judgment of the community still burned. By midday, Chaska led her to the river once more. The water flowed smoothly, reflecting the sky above like a mirror. "Today you will learn to fish," he said, "not with traps or nets, but with patience and understanding. The fish are like life. They do not yield to force, only to care and attention." Winona knelt by the water, watching the ripples shimmer in the sunlight. She dipped her hands gently into the cool current, feeling its energy and motion. Chaska demonstrated first, showing her how to move quietly along the bank, how to watch for signs of fish below the surface, and how to cast the line with skill. His patience and calmness eased her tension. As she tried, her first attempts were clumsy. The line tangled, the bait slipped, and frustration crept into her chest. She sighed, ready to give up. But Chaska placed a steady hand on her shoulder, not to correct her, but to remind her that persistence mattered. "Do not fight the river," he said gently. "Let it guide you. You cannot control the fish, only yourself." Winona took a deep breath and tried again, moving with care and attention. Slowly, she began to understand the rhythm, the patience, the respect the water demanded. When at last she caught her first fish, small and silver, her eyes lit up with a mixture of pride and surprise. Chaska smiled at her quietly, sensing her small victory. "You see," he said, "even in small things, strength grows." Hours passed with work and practice, yet the sun began to dip toward the horizon once again. Winona felt a growing fatigue, not just in her body, but in her mind. The weight of her past, the village's judgment, and the uncertainty of her future pressed heavily upon her. Chaska noticed it, as he had noticed everything. "Come," he said, leading her back to the lodge. "Sit by the fire. Rest. Your heart carries burdens that your body cannot always show. Let it breathe." She obeyed, feeling a strange comfort in his presence. They sat in silence, the fire's glow casting dancing shadows across their faces. Winona thought of her husband, of the hurt and rejection, but she also thought of the warrior beside her. He had offered her protection without demands, guidance without judgment. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope, a fragile, quiet ember that she feared might go out if she dared to name it aloud. Chaska broke the silence. "You are stronger than you realize. But the heart can be wounded in ways the body cannot show. Do not fear those wounds. They are part of what makes you human." Winona looked into his eyes, and in that moment, she felt seen. Truly seen. The warrior's words were not pity, nor were they empty gestures. They were recognition, a mirror of her strength even when she could not feel it herself. The days that followed were filled with small trials. Winona learned to move quietly through the village, to carry herself with dignity despite the whispers of judgment. Chaska taught her to track animals, to recognize the signs of danger, and to understand the rhythms of the plains. Each lesson strengthened her body and mind, but also nurtured a trust between them that was growing quietly, like a seed beneath the snow waiting for spring. Yet even as they grew closer, tension lingered. Winona wrestled with guilt and uncertainty. Could she allow herself to care for someone again? Could she trust that love could come not from obligation, but from respect and mutual understanding? Chaska, too, felt the stirrings of unfamiliar emotions. He had faced countless dangers and challenges, yet this quiet bond with a wounded, resilient woman was something he had not anticipated. One evening, a rival warrior appeared near the edge of the village, testing Chaska's skill and courage. Winona watched as he moved with precision and strategy, confronting danger not with anger, but with calculated calm. Her heart thudded with fear and admiration. When the threat passed, she approached him, her voice barely above a whisper. You... You are brave," she said. Chaska looked at her, his eyes softening. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to face it, even when your heart trembles. Winona nodded, feeling the truth of his words. Slowly the walls around her heart began to shift. Perhaps it was possible to trust, to care, to allow herself to heal. Perhaps this warrior, with his quiet strength and steady presence, could help her do so. As night fell and the stars emerged over the plains, the lodge was filled with a quiet understanding. They did not need words for everything. Their bond spoke in gestures, glances, and shared silences. Winona felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that her story was no longer only about loss, but also about the possibility of renewal. Chaska sat by the fire, his gaze resting on the woman who had come to him wounded and afraid. He did not yet know where this bond would lead, only that it had begun, quietly but irrevocably. Outside, the wind whispered through the grasses, carrying with it the promise of new challenges, new lessons, and perhaps, one day, new love. The plain stretched endlessly beyond the village, a vast expanse of possibility. And in that space, two hearts, one broken, one guarded, began to understand that even in sorrow, there could be strength. Even in loss, there could be hope. The sun had barely risen over the plains when a faint alarm stirred the village. Smoke from a nearby fire curled into the sky, and the distant shouts of villagers carried over the wind. Chaska's senses went immediately alert. He moved quickly, gathering his bow, his spear, and his shield, his mind sharp and focused. He had faced danger before, from rival bands, wild animals, and storms that swept through the plains, but this threat felt closer, more immediate. Winona, still sleepy but alert, followed him. Her eyes, once clouded with grief, now held a growing determination. She had learned much under Chaska's guidance: patience, vigilance, and the quiet strength needed to face adversity. Today she would put that learning to use. "They are coming from the east," Chaska said, scanning the horizon. "A rival band. They mean to steal our food and test our strength." Winona's heart pounded, but she did not falter. "What should we do?" she asked. "We defend," Chaska said simply. "We protect what is ours, and we do it with strategy, not only force." He guided her to the edge of the village, where the huts were spaced with small openings for visibility. Together, they began to organize the villagers, calling on the men to stand guard and directing women and elders to secure the children and livestock. Chaska's calm authority inspired confidence. Even those who had doubted Winona's presence at his side now watched her with curiosity and respect. She helped reinforce barricades, gathered the villagers quietly, and directed them to safety, her voice firm yet gentle. As the rival warriors approached, their shouts and battle cries echoing across the plains, Chaska took his position near the center of the village. Winona stood close, watching him with both admiration and concern. She had seen the courage he displayed in smaller challenges, but now she saw him in full command, every movement precise, every decision deliberate. The attack began suddenly, with a rush of dust and noise. Chaska moved like the wind, intercepting the first wave of intruders with swift strikes and careful defense. Winona, remembering his lessons, ducked behind a low barrier, helping the villagers shield themselves while keeping a watchful eye on the enemy. Her fear did not paralyze her, it sharpened her focus. Hours passed in a blur of motion. Chaska fought with skill, but it was not only his strength that kept the rival band at bay. It was the coordination, the careful planning, and the trust he had built with Winona and the villagers. Each person had a role, and each role mattered. Winona realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. During a brief pause in the battle, Chaska moved toward her. He could see the strain in her eyes, the exhaustion in her posture, yet he also saw the determination and growing strength. "You are doing well," he said quietly, his voice carrying over the chaos. Winona looked up at him, catching her breath. I... I'm trying, she replied. You are more than trying, he said. You are leading. You are protecting others. That is courage. She felt a warmth in her chest, a strange mix of pride and relief. For the first time, she understood that her worth was not measured by her past, by her husband's rejection, or by the whispers of the villagers. Her actions, her choices, her heart, they all mattered. And Chaska had seen them, had recognized them, even when she had doubted herself. The rival warriors pressed harder, attempting to break through the defenses. Chaska intercepted a man at the edge of the village, using his spear to block the attack, then countering with a swift strike that sent the intruder tumbling to the ground. Winona watched, her heart racing, yet she did not look away. Instead, she observed carefully, learning, remembering, preparing herself. As the battle raged, a child's cry rang out from the far side of the village. Winona acted immediately, moving toward the sound with a fearless determination. She reached the child, lifting him from harm's way and carrying him behind the barricades. Chaska, seeing her bravery, felt a surge of admiration. This woman, once abandoned and afraid, now moved with purpose and courage that rivaled even the most seasoned warriors. The fight continued until the rival band, recognizing the village's resilience and the coordinated defense led by Chaska and Winona, began to retreat. Dust and smoke settled over the plains as silence returned, broken only by the soft murmurs of villagers checking on one another and tending to minor injuries. Chaska wiped the sweat from his brow and looked at Winona. You fought well, he said. More than well. You led when it was needed. You. You protected others, even when you could have stayed safe. Winona's hands trembled slightly. I... I did not think I could, she admitted. But I could not let anyone be hurt. Not anymore. I... I have learned from you. Chaska studied her closely, his gaze steady and thoughtful. You have more courage than many warriors, he said, and more wisdom than many elders. I did not expect this. You have changed much in a short time. Her eyes met his, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them, a bond forged not by convenience or circumstance, but by trust, courage, and mutual respect. For both of them, the battle had been more than a test of strength. It had been a test of character, of heart. The villagers, seeing Winona's bravery, began to treat her differently. Whispers of judgment faded, replaced by admiration and gratitude. Elders nodded at her with approval, children looked to her with wonder, and even the once skeptical men recognized her as a capable and brave presence in the village. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Chaska and Winona returned to the lodge. The lodge felt different now, not just a place of refuge, but a place where hearts could begin to heal. Winona sat by the fire, her hands still shaking slightly, while Chaska prepared a simple meal. You were remarkable today, he said quietly, placing food before her. Not because you fought, but because you acted when fear might have held you back. That is courage. Winona looked down at the meal, feeling the weight of his words. She had come to the lodge seeking safety, protection from the world's cruelty. Yet she had found something unexpected: strength, trust, and a sense of purpose. And somewhere along the way, her heart had begun to open again, cautiously but undeniably. I never thought I could do such things, she whispered. None of us know what we are capable of until tested, Chaska said. Sometimes the heart must be tested too. For a long while, they sat in silence, the fire casting flickering shadows across the walls. Outside, the plains stretched endlessly, vast and untamed. Yet within the lodge, a quiet understanding had grown between them. They had faced danger together, shared fear and courage, and in doing so, had begun to forge a connection neither had expected. Winona felt a strange calm settling over her. She had survived loss, rejection, and doubt, yet here she was, standing not only as a survivor, but as a protector, a leader, a woman capable of courage and wisdom. And Chaska, the warrior who had first offered her shelter, now stood beside her not only as a protector, but as someone who recognized her strength and honored it. That night, as they prepared to sleep, Winona found herself reflecting on the day's events. She had faced fear, taken action, and discovered courage she had never known. She had learned that strength was not only in the body but in the heart, in the willingness to care for others and to act despite uncertainty. Chaska, sitting quietly by the fire, watched her with a mixture of admiration and something else he could not yet name. He had expected to protect a broken woman, to offer guidance and safety. Instead, he had found someone who could teach him as well, who could challenge his assumptions and inspire him in ways he had not anticipated. The wind whispered through the plains, carrying with it the promise of more challenges, more lessons, and, perhaps one day, a love that neither had expected. For now, though, they rested, side by side in the quiet lodge, hearts slowly mending, trust growing, and the bond between them deepening. The plains were vast, and the future uncertain. But Chaska and Winona had faced the storm together. And in facing it, they had discovered something neither had foreseen: the power of an unforeseen bond, a connection forged in courage, trust, and the quiet bravery of two hearts learning to heal. The sun rose slowly over the plains, bathing the village in soft golden light. A quiet stillness hung in the air, as if the world itself paused to breathe. Chaska stepped outside the lodge, his eyes scanning the horizon. The rival warriors had not returned, and the village appeared calm, yet he knew that peace was never permanent on these wide, untamed lands. Winona emerged behind him, carrying a small basket of freshly gathered berries. Her movements were steady, confident, no longer the hesitant steps of the woman who had arrived weeks ago, but deliberate, graceful, and strong. The villagers paused as they passed, nodding with respect. They had seen her courage, her wisdom, and her care for others, and now she had earned a place not only among them, but within their hearts. Chaska watched her, feeling a quiet pride that stirred something deeper within him. The bond between them, forged in the fires of fear, courage, and shared struggle, had grown stronger. He had offered protection, guidance, and friendship, but he had not foreseen how profoundly she would change him, how she would heal the wounds in his heart as much as he had helped heal hers. "Good morning," Winona said softly, setting the basket down. "Good morning," Chaska replied, his voice carrying warmth and something unspoken. They worked together to help the villagers prepare for the day. Chaska led a group to reinforce the fences and check the livestock, while Winona organized the women and children, teaching them how to gather food and care for the sick. She moved with quiet authority, guiding, instructing, and inspiring, without ever raising her voice. Her confidence, born from her trials and Chaska's teachings, radiated outward, and even the youngest children followed her with trust. At midday, the village gathered for a council. Elders, warriors, and villagers of all ages came together in the center of the camp. Chaska and Winona stood side by side, an unspoken acknowledgement of the partnership that had grown between them. The elders spoke first, commending the villagers for their bravery during the recent attacks and recognizing the leadership shown by both the warrior and the woman who had once been rejected. "You have demonstrated courage," the eldest said, his voice steady. "You have protected one another, defended your homes, and shown wisdom beyond your years. Let this be a lesson to all. Strength is not measured only by skill in battle, but by the heart and mind that guide us." Winona felt her cheeks warm with pride, and she glanced at Chaska. He gave her a small, approving nod. Neither of them spoke yet, but in that glance they understood what words could not convey: mutual respect, trust, and the first stirrings of love. Later, as the village settled into the quiet of the afternoon, Chaska and Winona walked along the river. The water glistened under the sun, mirroring the sky above. For a long time they walked in silence, listening to the soft rush of the current, the calls of birds, and the rustling of the grasses. "You have changed much," Chaska said finally, breaking the quiet. "Not just in skill or courage, but in spirit. I did not expect that my guidance would lead to this." Winona looked at him, a soft smile on her lips. "I did not expect it either. I came here seeking safety, protection from the pain of my past. Instead, I found something more: strength, purpose, and trust. I have learned to see the world not only through fear, but through hope." Chaska's expression softened. "And you have restored something in me as well." "I have faced many battles, but never one like this. One where the heart was tested. You, you have shown me what it means to care, to trust, and to fight for something beyond survival." Winona's eyes met his, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. The river flowed quietly beside them. The plains stretched endlessly beyond, and the air carried a sense of possibility. She reached out, taking his hand. He did not pull away. Instead, he held it gently, a silent promise of companionship, respect, and care. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the village gathered for the evening meal. Chaska and Winona prepared it together, working side by side, laughing softly at small mistakes, and sharing stories. The villagers watched, some smiling, some whispering, but all sensing that something significant had blossomed between them. After the meal, the elders called for a small ceremony by the fire. They spoke of courage, unity, and the importance of protecting the village and one another. Then they turned to Chaska and Winona, acknowledging their contributions. "You have both shown that strength is not only in the arm, but in the heart," the eldest said. "You have faced fear, uncertainty, and loss, and in doing so, you have shown that true courage is in care, respect, and love. Let this bond between you serve as an example to all who walk the plains." Winona felt her heart swell. She had been rejected, abandoned, and humiliated. Yet here she stood, recognized, valued, and honored. Her past no longer defined her. Her actions, courage, and heart did. Chaska, too, felt the weight of the moment. The realization that life's greatest victories were not always won in battle, but in the quiet moments of trust and connection. Night fell over the plains, and the village quieted. Chaska and Winona returned to their lodge, the fire crackling softly. They sat close, hands still intertwined, hearts beating in rhythm with one another. "I never imagined this," Winona whispered, "that someone could see me, respect me, and care for me." Chaska shook his head slightly, a small smile playing on his lips. "Neither did I. I thought I was offering protection. Instead, I found someone who restores my heart, challenges my fears, and teaches me courage in ways I had not known." For a long while, they sat in silence, watching the fire and listening to the wind through the grasses. The plains stretched endlessly beyond the lodge, a vast and untamed expanse, yet within its boundaries, hearts that had been wounded were finding healing, trust, and love. The next morning, the village awoke to a sense of calm and renewal. Children played freely in the sunlight, elders smiled knowingly, and the villagers moved with confidence. Chaska and Winona worked together, side by side, teaching and guiding, their bond a living example of courage, respect, and care. As they walked along the river later that day, Chaska spoke quietly. "The plains will always bring challenges," he said. "Storms, rival warriors, hunger, all will come. But together, we can face them." And now, together, they had discovered that even in loss and pain, hearts could be restored, trust could be rebuilt, and love could grow. The plains whispered around them, carrying the promise of new adventures, new challenges, and a life forged in courage, respect, and shared strength. And in that vast, open land, two hearts beat together as one, ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that they were no longer alone. Her body had been weak from days of sorrow and hunger, and she felt strength returning with each mouthful. Still, her mind wandered back to her husband's rejection, the harsh words he had spoken as he left her alone and humiliated. She pressed her lips together, holding back tears that threatened to spill. She had come to Chaska's lodge for protection, yet she had not expected to confront the echoes of her past so soon. Chaska watched her closely, sensing the storm within her. He had seen grief many times, both in warriors who had lost friends and families who had suffered misfortune. Yet there was something in Winona's sorrow that was different. It was quiet, deep, like a river running beneath ice, silent to the eye but alive and powerful beneath the surface. "The village will speak," he said quietly, almost as if reading her thoughts. "They will talk about you, about us. It is inevitable." Winona nodded slowly. "I know. I have already felt their eyes on me. I cannot hide from their whispers." "You cannot control what others say," Chaska replied, "but you can choose how you respond. Strength is not always in the sword or the bow. Sometimes it is in endurance, in living with dignity when the world questions your worth." Winona looked at him, studying his face. "You make it sound easy." Chaska shook his head slightly. "It is never easy, but it is possible." The morning passed slowly, with small tasks and quiet conversation. Chaska taught Winona how to prepare the roots for the fire, how to gather clean water from the river without disturbing its flow, and how to recognize the signs of approaching storms in the sky. Each lesson, practical and simple, carried with it an unspoken message. Strength comes from understanding, from knowing one's environment and one's limits. As they worked, the villagers began to notice. Some whispered as they passed, glances thrown in Chaska's direction. And we will, because we have each other, and because our hearts are stronger than fear. Winona squeezed his hand, feeling the truth of his words. I believe that now, she said softly. I know that even when life brings pain, there is hope. And I know that we can face it together. The river flowed steadily beside them, the sun glinting off the water like scattered diamonds. The plains stretched endlessly, vast and free, yet no longer lonely. Together, they had faced fear, endured trials, and discovered strength, trust, and love. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Chaska and Winona stood on a hill overlooking the village. The sky was painted in brilliant colors, orange, pink, and gold blending into the deep blue of night. Below them, the village glowed softly, fires flickering like tiny stars. Winona leaned her head on Chaska's shoulder, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for believing in me, for helping me find myself again. Chaska placed his hand gently on hers. And thank you for restoring my heart, he replied, for showing me that courage, love, and trust can be found in the most unexpected places. They stood together, watching the sun disappear beyond the horizon, the plains stretching endlessly before them. In that quiet moment, hearts mended, trust renewed, and love quietly blossomed. The world was vast, uncertain, and often harsh, yet for Chaska and Winona, the future was bright, full of promise, and ready to be shaped by their courage and care. As night settled over the plains, the stars began to twinkle, their light reflected in the river and in the eyes of the warrior and the woman who had once been rejected. They had faced fear, sorrow, and doubt. They had endured storms, both literal and of the heart.